The land of Israel was in turmoil. King Ahab and Queen Jezebel had turned away from God. They worshipped the false god Baal. The people followed their wicked ways. Their hearts were cold. Their spirits were lost. Then Elijah arrived, a prophet, bold and courageous. He stood before the wicked king. His message echoed with the very voice of God. "There will be no rain," he declared, "until I speak the word." Ahab scoffed. Jezebel raged. But Elijah stood firm. He knew the power of the true God. He trusted in his word. And so the heavens closed. The rain ceased to fall. The land began to thirst. The drought was relentless. The sun beat down, scorching the earth. The rivers dwindled to a trickle, then vanished altogether. But God did not forget Elijah. He led him to a secret place, a haven in the wilderness. By the Brook Cherith, Elijah found refuge. The brook, fed by hidden springs, flowed clear and cool. And each day, something extraordinary happened. Ravens, those black-winged creatures, became God's messengers. They brought him bread and meat morning and evening. Elijah, sustained by God's miraculous provision, lived in the wilderness. He waited for the Lord's next command. As the drought tightened its grip, the brook slowed to a trickle. Soon, even this lifeline dried up. But God had another plan, another test of faith for his faithful servant. He spoke to Elijah once more, directing him westward. "Go to Zarephath," the Lord instructed. "To a widow there I have commanded to sustain you." Elijah, weary but trusting, obeyed. He found the widow gathering sticks at the city gate. He was thirsty and hungry. With a trembling voice he asked for water and a morsel of bread. The widow, her face etched with despair, shook her head. "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she cried, "I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar, and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering a couple of sticks to prepare what little I have for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah stayed in Zarephath for many days, a city that was foreign to him but where he found refuge. The drought continued, casting a shadow over the land, but within the widow's home God's power was evident. The flour never ran out, a miraculous provision that defied the harsh reality outside. The jar of oil remained full, a testament to the divine intervention that sustained them. And then, tragedy struck. The widow's son, her only child, fell ill and died, plunging the household into deep sorrow. Overcome with grief, the widow turned on Elijah, her voice filled with anguish and accusation. "What do you have to do with me, man of God?" she cried, her voice trembling with pain and confusion. "Have you come to bring my sin to remembrance and to slay my son?" Her words were a mix of sorrow and desperation. But Elijah, moved by compassion, took the lifeless boy in his arms, determined to seek God's intervention. He carried him to the upper room and laid him on the bed, a place of solitude and prayer. He stretched himself out upon the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, his voice echoing with fervent faith. "O Lord my God, let this child's life return to him." Elijah's prayer was a plea for divine mercy, and God heard Elijah's prayer. The boy's life returned. He breathed again, a miracle that defied death. Elijah brought the boy back to his mother, his heart filled with gratitude and relief. "See," he said, "your son lives." The words were a balm to the widow's wounded heart. The widow, overcome with joy and awe, finally understood the magnitude of the miracle. This was no ordinary man. Elijah was a vessel of God's power and mercy. This was a prophet of the living God, a beacon of hope in a time of despair. Section 5. The Fire from Heaven. 3 years passed. The land of Israel was parched and barren. The people, weary and desperate, cried out for relief. Then the Lord spoke to Elijah. "Go, present yourself to Ahab," he commanded, "and I will send rain upon the land." Elijah obeyed. He stood before Ahab once more, his voice ringing with authority. "Gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel," he proclaimed, "and bring the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Ahab, desperate for the drought to end, agreed. The people gathered. The stage was set for a showdown between the true God and the false gods of Baal and Asherah. Elijah addressed the crowd. "How long will you waver between 2 opinions?" he thundered. "If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him." Section 6. A still, small voice. The people were silent. They stood in a hushed reverence, their hearts heavy with the weight of their actions and the realization of their misguidance. They knew in their hearts that the Lord was the true God, but they had been led astray. The path they had followed was one of false promises and empty rituals, and now they faced the consequences of their choices. I alone am left as a prophet of the Lord," Elijah continued, "while the prophets of Baal are 450 men." His voice carried a tone of both sorrow and determination, a lone beacon of faith amidst a sea of doubt. "Let 2 bulls be given to us." The simplicity of his request belied the gravity of the challenge he was about to set forth. "Let them choose 1 bull for themselves and cut it in pieces and lay it on the wood, but put no fire to it." The instructions were clear, leaving no room for misinterpretation or deceit. "I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood." Elijah's actions were deliberate, each movement a testament to his unwavering faith. "Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord." His challenge was not just to the prophets of Baal, but to the very essence of their beliefs. The God who answers by fire, he is God. The people agreed. Their nods signified a collective hope, a desire for clarity and truth. The prophets of Baal prepared their altar. They worked with a fervor born of desperation, each stone laid with a silent prayer for validation. They cried out to their God from morning until noon, dancing around the altar they had made. Their voices grew hoarse, their movements more frantic as the hours passed. But there was no response. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to their earlier cries. No fire, no voice. The stillness around the altar was a testament to the futility of their efforts. At noon, Elijah mocked them. His words cut through the air, a sharp reminder of their impotence. "Cry aloud, for he is a God." His voice dripped with sarcasm, challenging the very foundation of their faith. "Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling." Elijah's taunts grew more pointed, each suggestion more absurd than the last. "Maybe he is sleeping, and must be awakened." The crowd's unease grew with each passing moment, their faith wavering. The prophets of Baal, frantic now, cried out louder and louder. Their desperation was palpable, a frantic attempt to summon a response. They cut themselves with swords and lances until the blood gushed out over them, a gruesome display of their devotion and despair. But still, there was no answer. Their God was silent. The realization settled over them like a shroud, their efforts in vain. Section 7, A Mantle Passes. Then Elijah stepped forward, his eyes filled with unwavering determination, knowing the weight of the task ahead. He repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down, carefully placing each stone back in its rightful place, restoring what had been lost. He laid the wood and prepared the bull, ensuring everything was in perfect order for the sacred ritual that was about to unfold. "Fill 4 jars with water," he instructed, "and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." The people watched in silence, wondering what Elijah was planning. 3 times they poured water over the altar until the trench around it was filled. The wood was soaked and the offering drenched. Then Elijah prayed, "O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word." His voice echoed with faith and conviction. "Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God and that you have turned their hearts back." The air was thick with anticipation. Then the fire of the Lord fell. It was a sight to behold, a divine spectacle that left everyone in awe. It consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. The power of the Lord was undeniable. The people fell on their faces, overwhelmed by the miraculous display of divine power. "The Lord, he is God," they shouted, their voices rising in unison, filled with reverence and awe. "The Lord, he is God," they cried, their hearts turned back to the one true God, united in their newfound faith. Section 8, The Chariot of Fire. After the fire on Mount Carmel, Elijah's ministry continued. He knew that his time on earth was coming to an end, and God had chosen Elisha to be his successor. One day, as they were walking along talking together, a fiery chariot appeared. Horses of fire pulled the chariot into the heavens. Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind. Elisha watched as his master was carried away, his heart filled with both sorrow and awe. As Elijah departed, his mantle, a symbol of his prophetic authority, fell to the ground. Elisha picked it up, and from that day forward, he carried on the work that Elijah had begun. The story of Elijah is a testament to the power of faith and the faithfulness of God. Even in the darkest of times, God is at work, and he can do extraordinary things through ordinary people who are willing to trust him.